Right, good morning, everybody. Well, good afternoon if you're in the UAE. Welcome to the first UAE-UK Business Council Innovation Working Group webinar. My name is Omar Hassan, founder of Global Growth Hub, which is an economic development consultancy, and the MENA Technology Fund. The MENA Technology Fund is a $50 million fund invested in early stage technology across the Middle East and Africa, in particular digital health, education, and agriculture and food. So this webinar is of particular interest to us. We've got a couple of speakers for you today, so it should be an amazing session. First, a series of keynote speakers who you'll hear from now, who'll give you an overview of kind of the work we're doing between the UAE and the UK and the importance of our bilateral relationships. And then we'll hand over to Ray, who will take us through two panels that will give us an overview of kind of innovation being used in this space, both from a corporate perspective, startups and SMEs between the UK and the UAE. So we'll kick things off with our first speaker. If you don't know him, his name is Lord Edward Lister. Lord Lister is the co-chair of the UAE-UK Business Council, also chairman of Homes of England since June 2016. Lord Lister has held many roles across government, Chief of Staff for Mayor of London, for when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London, Deputy Mayor for Policy and Planning at City Hall. He's currently also the Director at Covent Garden Market Authority and Governor of Museum of England. Lord Lister.
Thanks very much. One correction: I'm no longer anything to do with Homes England. That was I left them a long time ago when I went to Downing Street, and then but then that's all past. Look, I'm delighted to welcome you all to this important webinar on food waste, and it's hosted jointly by the UAE-UK Business Council in partnership with the Emirates Society. And I'm really grateful to the Business Innovation Working Group for planning the whole event. The UAE-UK Business Council acts as a thought leadership forum, bringing together business leaders and academics to identify new areas of collaboration and partnership between the two countries. And we work very, very closely with both the UAE Embassy in London and the British embassies both in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. And I'm really grateful that the UAE ambassador to the UK is actually listening in on this call, because without the support of the embassies, we wouldn't be able to do half of what we're able to do, which is really great. I work very closely with my co-chair, His Excellency Ahmed Al-Sayar, and we are a connector between the business community and the government, supporting policymakers in creating the right enabling environment for companies, particularly in the dynamic and fast-growing sectors such as agri-tech, to exchange ideas, new innovations. And of course, this is also important in the light of the forthcoming negotiations on an FTA, which are coming up in the near future. Food security and food waste have long been issues of great concern globally, but the concern has intensified over the last year as a result of the pandemic and the increasing impact of global change. Global food supply chains have been disrupted and crop yields have suffered across the world as everybody sought to adapt to COVID. I am absolutely certain that food waste will feature in COP26, which the UK is hosting in Glasgow at the beginning of November. As you will hear more detail from our speakers today, if you classified food waste as a country, it would be the world's third largest emitter of CO2 after China and the US. Not a great story. Technology and innovation will undoubtedly be the solution to addressing the food waste challenge, as well as boosting food security, so that nearly 1 billion people who currently go very hungry have a more reliable supply of food in the future. Some of the world's most innovative and exciting agri-tech companies have come out of the UK and UAE in recent years. And I hope that today's event will help to identify new areas where we can work together. We have both large corporates, such as Sainsbury's and BR, and smaller companies such as Winnow's Seafood Souk and AEH Innovative Hydrogel presenting today. The trade relationship between the UK and the UAE last year was worth just over 15 billion. This is a drop of 3 billion on the previous year due to the disruptions caused by COVID. But I am very confident that we can hit our stated target of 25 billion within a few years. The growth, though, will not come, however, simply by increasing volumes of exports in our traditional industries. It will come from technology-driven, innovative companies, many of which are SMEs, that are seeking to address some of the critical issues that the world faces today, of which food security and waste are two of the most important. Once again, thank you very much. A big thank you to the two embassies, and very much looking forward to hearing from the speakers.
Lord Lister, thank you. I want to go now to Nejla. I've known Nejla for a number of years, and I couldn't be happier to be working with her in this group. Nejla Midfa is the Chief Executive Officer for Sharjah Entrepreneurship Centre. It's a government entity launched in 2016 with a mandate to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Sharjah and support entrepreneurs as they build and grow innovative startups. Not only that, Nejla is also on the board of United Arab Bank and Emirates Development Bank. She's a member of the board of directors at Dana Gas and Emirates School Establishment. Nejla is also the chair of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Group here at the UAE-UK Business Council. Nejla, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Omar, for the warm introduction. And Lord Lister, thank you for the introduction to UUBC. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to join you today as we discuss one of the world's most pressing problems and showcase innovative solutions for a brighter and more sustainable future. Allow me to begin with a brief introduction about Sharaih. As Omar mentioned, we are a government-supported entity that empowers entrepreneurs to build ventures that address today's societal, economic, and environmental challenges. We do all this in Sharjah, one of the 7 emirates in the UAE. Sharjah has established itself as a leading hub for education and is home to over 30,000 university students. Being located at the heart of this critical mass of talent has put Sharjah in the unique position to lead Sharjah's efforts to build a world-class startup ecosystem that produces globally competitive, high-impact ventures. Over the past 5 years, we have incubated over 114 startups that have gone on to raise over $87 million in investment, created over 1,300 jobs, and generated over $130 million in revenue. Returning to today's topic, let me set the scene for you with a few staggering statistics. In a world where over 800 million people go hungry each year, we waste an enormous amount of food on a global scale. 1/3 of all food produced ends up being wasted, and this costs the global economy more than $1 trillion annually. Here in the MENA region, reports show that we waste up to 250 kilograms per capita a year of food. And when it comes to the UAE, food waste sets us back an average of $3.5 billion every year, with an average person wasting around 197 kilograms of food per year. We take heart, however, in the knowledge that food waste is a prominent fixture on our sustainability agenda. We saw our increasing concern turn into action with the launch of the UAE Food Bank in 2017 under the umbrella of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Global Initiatives. The UAE Food Bank is committed to distributing food to those in need while eliminating food waste by collaborating with local authorities, as well as local and international charities, to create a comprehensive ecosystem to efficiently store, package, and distribute excess fresh food from hotels, restaurants, and supermarkets. The UAE's hospitality sector, which contributes to over 30% of all food waste, is specifically stepping up its efforts, with the key players in the industry taking up the UAE Food Waste Pledge to fight food waste in their kitchens. In addition, a wave of innovation has swept the country, with new developments in sustainable food production and waste management. At Shara', we have witnessed firsthand the appetite for innovation and investment in this arena when we launched a competition last year for agri-food tech startups from around the world. I want to take a moment to share some of the creative solutions that came our way. Now, I'm sure that many of us covet our morning coffees, but when was the last time any one of us spared a thought about what we would do with the used coffee grounds? An Egyptian startup called Cup devised a waste collection system to collect used coffee grounds, utilizing them to cultivate natural food products such as mushrooms. So can you imagine the next time you dig into a steak with mushroom sauce, that the mushrooms came straight out of the imagination of a couple of changemakers? The startup has successfully partnered with giants such as Dunkin' Donuts and Costa Coffee, and has expanded into providing more quality agricultural products through food waste collection. Returning back to Sharjah, we saw dynamic solutions for tackling food waste in the airline industry. One of our Shara' graduates, called The Concept, created an in-flight smart tray which uses IoT technology to collect data on how much food passengers eat when they fly. So when you are eating your in-flight meal, a chip in the tray is recording exactly what you ordered and how much of your food you left behind. Recording food preferences helps the airline industry reduce food waste, an issue that costs the industry around $3.9 billion every year. The Concept recently secured a pilot with Etihad Airways to develop and implement their solution, so keep an eye out for a smart tray on your next flight. We know that what we are looking at is a long and challenging road ahead when it comes to reducing food waste, especially with the added challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, our entrepreneurs give us hope, continuing to impress us year after year with their ideas and innovations. The future will see them continue to play a key role in meeting the UAE's food waste reduction goals. Before I wrap up, I would like to take this opportunity to personally invite each and every one of you to join us later this year at the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival, taking place November 22nd and 23rd. The event is a rich opportunity for businesses and startups from the UK to collaborate with their counterparts in the UAE to exchange ideas and share expertise across a variety of different sectors. Once again, thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of the seminar.
Nejla, thank you so much. And it's amazing what Sharjah has achieved in the last 4 years, 5 years, and can't wait to see the rest of what's going to happen over the next few years. Thank you. To our next speaker, I'm delighted to introduce Lord Richard Benyon. Lord Benyon was appointed Parliamentary Under Secretary for State of State at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs since on May 13th, 2021. Prior to that, Richard Benyon was a Parliamentary Under Secretary for State for Natural Environment, Water and Rural Affairs from May 2010 to October 2013. Lord Benyon, thank you so much for joining us. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's very good to be on such a huge call with so many real influencing people in this very key area. I may sound a little bit parochial when I'm talking about what's happening in the UK, but it is very much within the construct of a global food industry, and one that we need to influence very dramatically. And I think where there can be an enormous amount of synergy between UAE and the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom at the moment, a number of planets are aligning. Some of it is driven by Brexit, some of it by the climate, and some of it by a new determined drive towards well-being. We recently passed an Agriculture Act. We are in the process of passing an environment bill. We have our drive towards net zero and COP26. And we have, as a result of COVID, a new determination to tackle a very severe problem in the UK, which is poor diet and obesity. And the thread running through all of these is how we treat and manage our waste. Any historian, I think, that looks back on UK policy at this time will say this was the first moment that the UK absolutely grasped the breadth and encompassed such broad a broad palette of issues and areas. Let me just set this in context. We want the entire food supply chain to help deliver a healthier diet, healthier food, and encourage healthier eating. We need to ensure that our food systems are sustainable and resilient, which deliver for people, for nature, and the climate. And we want a farming sector producing healthy food for consumption at home and abroad, where all farmers have the opportunity to be rewarded for maintaining and enhancing the natural environment, for reducing carbon emissions, and improving the health and welfare of farmed animals across the whole farmed countryside. We also want to deliver a landscape and ecosystem recovery through long-term land use change projects. And that is one of the reasons why we asked the food entrepreneur, Henry Dimbleby, to lead an independent review of the food system, which will inform a government food strategy, which will be published later within the next 6 months. He is also the lead non-executive director of the department in which I'm a minister. The scope of this review and subsequent white paper covers the entire food chain, from field to fork, the production, marketing, processing, sale, purchase of food, the consumption of it, both in the home and out of it, the consumer practices, resources, and institutions involved in that process, and of course, waste. To that end, our food strategy white paper will build on existing policy work, such as developed under the Agriculture Act and the obesity strategy, and to help ensure that our food system delivers healthy and affordable food for all people and is built upon a resilient and sustainable agriculture sector. And so this will encompass agricultural reforms aiming to support farming practices to create a thriving biodiverse countryside with cleaner air and water. Agriculture accounts for around 10% of the UK's total greenhouse gas emissions, and emissions from methane make up over half of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions. Since 1990, emissions from agriculture have reduced by 13%, but it's important that we do more. I hope you can hear me above the sound of heavy machinery outside my window, but I'll press on. The Clean Growth Strategy and 25-year Environment Plan set out a range of specific commitments to further reduce emissions from agriculture, and the Net Zero Strategy, which will be published ahead of COP26 later this year, will outline pathways for each sector to decarbonize. We're already aware of the great efforts that have been made in the UK to reduce on-farm waste, but we're also aware there is a lot more that we can do. We want to work closely with everybody in the agriculture and the agri-food chain at home and abroad to minimize on-farm waste, and we want to see further investment and uptake in new technology. For reducing waste in the supply chain, we support something called the Quartile 2025 Voluntary Agreement, which is promoted by our government-private partnership, which is called the Waste Resources Action Programme. And that looks to reduce food waste by 20% by 2025. Action here is primarily through a roadmap called the Food Waste Reduction Roadmap and something called the Target, Measure, Act approach, where businesses are set a reduction target, where they measure food waste and then act to reduce it. This is currently voluntary, but we will consult this year on the detail of a proposed regulation which might make the transparent reporting of food waste mandatory for businesses of an appropriate size. It was launched in 2018. The Food Waste Reduction Roadmap encompasses the entire supply chain from field to fork, and it sets out a clear direction for all large businesses in the UK, what they need to achieve in order for us to achieve SDG 12.3, and provides a basis to track progress. It promotes Target, Measure, Act as a key tool to help businesses reduce waste by setting targets, measuring their food waste, and then acting on it. Reducing food waste will mitigate against climate change and protect biodiversity. And that stark statistic that Eddie Lister quoted earlier is one that absolutely is in our heads. For instance, reducing food waste will mean that we use less water and land for an end product that is wasted. 25 to 30% of global greenhouse gases come from the food system alone. So this is a real important driver. We are committed, as I say, to meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goal 12.3 target, which seeks to halve global food waste at consumer and retail levels and reduce food losses along the supply chain by 2030. Muted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Apologies.
Okay. As you know, the food system is global. We need to ensure that our food systems are sustainable, that they're resilient, and they deliver for people, the nature and climate, as I said earlier. We are introducing world-leading due diligence legislation through the Environment Bill to tackle illegal deforestation. And this might sound unconnected to food and waste, but it is absolutely fundamental, as I'm sure you will know. Deforestation is part of the global UK supply chain problem, and it's one that we have a wider package of measures to improve the sustainability of our supply chains, and will contribute to global efforts to protect forests and other ecosystems. And you'll see this is absolutely key part of our COP26 plan. And as president of COP26, we are convening an unprecedented global dialogue on trade in forest and agricultural commodities, working with producer and consumer countries to discuss and agree an inclusive vision and an effective roadmap for global action. And I'll finish by just talking about one issue which Najla and Eddie Lister have both touched on, which is, of course, technology. There's a sweet spot in achieving lower food miles, and therefore lower carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, a healthier diet, and producing products that keep people healthy and live longer, better lives, and a food system that doesn't damage the environment, and that is low waste, both on farm and at the end of shelf life. And that sweet spot can be achieved through the help of technology. I'll give you one example. Last week, I met a vertical farming company called Grow Up, who have ambitions to completely disrupt the current import heavy basis of the leafy green industry in the UK. And they have developed, they have a technology which will be familiar with many of you in the UAE, but is of growing importance in developed economies like the UK and the US. This uses over 90% less water, produces a product that has 3 times the shelf life of normal leafy greens, uses no sprays and no fertilizers, and it is a product that can compete in terms of taste and quality with anything that's grown in more conventional circumstances. Its problem is power, is electricity. It's very expensive in electricity terms to produce, but they've cracked this now with the use of renewables. And I think that this is an area where the UAE and the UK can work very closely together. You have access to extraordinary quantities of renewable energy, not just solar, but through other means as well. And I think that this kind of technology can completely change the way we are producing food, producing it closer to home. Interesting, I know that Sainsbury's are very committed to this. It'd be interesting to hear from Claire what work they're doing in this field. Najla talked about change makers. Well, change makers are going to change the way we eat, the way we get food to our plate, and how we treat waste. And sometimes the clunky supply chain that we've existed with for too long needs this kind of disruption. And we're looking to you to help us in achieving that. You're doing much of this, and we respect that. But we are very mindful of the fragility of our supply chain, as has been proved by COVID. And we want to make sure that we are working with regions of the world and innovative companies that are going to be the path to addressing these problems, these absolutely massive problems. Thank you for the chance of sharing this with you. I look forward to hearing from other speakers and answering any questions later.
Richard, thank you so much. And I hope that at some point this year, together with Najla, Khalid, Dr. Isam, and the rest of the council, we can organise something to bring these kind of innovators and entrepreneurs together between the UK and the UAE. Thank you. Now, moving to our last but not least, our final keynote, Dr. Isam. Dr. Isam is Head of Food Trade Control Section of the Food Safety Department in Dubai Municipality and a member of the UAE Food Bank Committee. Dr. Isam, are you with us?
Yes, thank you very much, Amar, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to participate in this event. I would like to share with you an initiative that we make that in Dubai to reduce their food loss. So I will try to go very quickly in this presentation. I hope you are able to see the presentation. Yes. So in Dubai, as it's known, we are totally depending on imported food. So every year we import almost 8 million tons of food are imported through our borders, Dubai. And in 2015, we noticed that almost 16,900 tons of food are extracted or rejected in the borders because of many reasons. Because of the documentation, let's say, certificates, halal certificates, health certificates, sometimes unfit samples. When we take samples, the food shipments are not complying with our standard, or sometimes physically unsatisfactory, so or it's spoiled. So these are the reasons we reject the food from the borders, and this increase the food loss. So we started to see the challenges of this problem. We saw that the food are not complying with the regulation, lack of awareness of the exporter, lack of the awareness of the importer who are in Dubai, and they are not aware about the regulation of the labeling or documentation. There's no alternative solution for the landfill. So this all foods goes every time to the landfills, and then we don't have very clear legislation for the alternative solutions for the food which is not complying with the regulation, and limited number of the recycling companies. So we started to see our procedure, internal procedure, how we can solve this problem. We started to analyze the data, and we started to put the solution. So in 2015, it was 16,000 tons of food were wasted, going to the landfill, then reduced to the 13,000 tons, then 3,000 tons, then 1,000 tons, then 1 ton. So we reduced this the full amount of the reduction. We reduced the food loss from 16,000 tons to almost 1 ton, and in 2020 it was almost 500 kg. So what did we do? It's a very simple solution, and I think it was very new to Dubai at that time. So we started to direct the food which is not meeting our requirement for the documentation only. So we took it to the UAE Food Bank, which is not meeting with the physically unsatisfied. It goes for the cell recycling, and which is also not meeting with the documentation, only halal. So for example, the shipment is not halal. We directed to the animal farms. So it is very simple solutions. We try to solve this problem with collaboration with these all entities. In 2019, it was 2,000 tons in 2019, it was 6,000 tons of food being directed to the alternative solutions. And in 2020, it was almost 13,000 of tons being directed to these three solutions. Still, it's a big problem because I talk only about the imported food, but still we have a big challenge at the level of the persons, individuals, retailers, hotels. Still, it's a big challenge that we are facing, and we are now currently we started to put another solutions to solve these problems. Almost, if you can say here, per day we have almost 8,000 tons of food are going to the landfill, and 30% of this food are of this waste are organic waste. So this is very briefly about our initiative, and we are here ready to hear from you any innovation and any solution that you think it can be a part of solving the challenge that we're having in the let's say in the at the individual level. We have some programs, we have some initiative, awareness programs, but still it is a big challenge and it should be solved, as has been mentioned by the previous speaker. Thank you very much.
Dr. Issam, thank you so much. And I know personally how forward-thinking and innovative Dubai is with a number of programs they run to help entrepreneurs access government frameworks and implement solutions. I think a couple of our speakers have been through that, so we'll get to hear more from them. But thank you to all our keynote speakers so far. Please stay with us and enjoy the rest of the webinar. I am now going to hand over to Ray Gibbs. He sent me a couple of bios for him, but he did say something about milk farms, which I can't find. But Ray is chairman of Joint Working Group on Implementation of Graphene Standardization between the UK and China in conjunction with the UK BSI and the Standards Administration Office of China. Now commercializing advanced materials at Manchester University, developing a world-first ecosystem offering commercial scale-up and a full business support structure. Ray, I'll hand over to you for our panels, and thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Yes, I did actually run the dairy cheese business dairy group for 5 years, but that's history. It did give me an insight into food manufacturing massively, which is pretty important. I'd like to introduce Claire Hughes from Sainsbury's PLC and Martin Wickham from the Department for International Trade, who are going to be my panel guests on the first part of what has already been a scene-setting experience of quite a lot of issues associated. Claire is formerly 12 years with Marks and Spencer, as a head of food technology, moved 4 years ago to the food retailer Sainsbury, then head of quality and innovation, and now for the last 9 months has been director of product and innovation. And Martin is food and drink investment specialist for the UK Government Department for International Trade, and his role is to increase foreign direct investment by developing world-class R&D and business opportunities in the UK's food and drink sector. And I'd like to start, Claire, with you, if that's okay.
Okay, that's great, and thank you for having me today.
That's welcome. We're running slightly behind time, but that's not a problem. I'd like to start with really looking at Sainsbury's as a group and how you see your work, particularly in the ESG, the environmental, social and government sector, which is a key platform of Sainsbury's developments.
Yeah, we had our first ESG day this year on the 17th of June, and we had over 100 investors actually attended that. We did it virtually. I think that worked quite well, as you'd probably expect us to do. And then actually in the afternoon sessions, we had breakouts so that the investors were able to ask us quite more specific, detailed questions. So we had a net zero plan. We've still got a net zero plan, but we've sort of repositioned it as Plan for Better. And under that plan, we would have Better for You, so all about a drive to healthy and sustainable diets, which links really well into the National Food Strategy in the UK. Better for the Planet, reduce carbon emissions as part of that. So we have we've got a target to be net zero by 2040, and we've got another target to reduce our Scope 3 emissions by 30%, minimise use of water, increase recycling, reduce food waste. So our target in food waste is reduce food waste by 50% by 2030, and on sustainability, sustainable sourcing and biodiversity as well, to get a net positive impact on our operations on biodiversity, and that's probably the pillar that's least scoped at the moment.
That's good. So where do you see the future of food going then in terms of retailing, Claire? Obviously sustainability is right up there amongst everything in bright neon lights, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think sustainability has to be part of everybody's agenda, no matter what the business are. Not only from an investment point of view, but also it's extremely important to customers. I don't think customers understand it all, but that's not a reason for not doing it. And what we have to do is take customers on that journey with us, and help them, or give them, or actually in a way do the work for them, so that their diet and becomes more sustainable as well from the products that they buy for us. I think it'll be interesting on where we go in areas such as health, actually, where that ends up in the future. And we've seen quite a large drive in plant-based foods in some areas, so particularly in dairy. So plant-based milks has grown massively in the UK. We've seen incredible growth, not so much, and quite high growth in other areas outside of that. But I think for the sort of sustainability point of view, it's more how we shouldn't tell people they can't eat foods, it's how we help them balance the diet. So there'll be lots in the food space, lots of innovation needed actually in the supply chain to help reduce emissions. How do we produce more efficiently? How do we waste less? And I'll come on to talk a bit about food waste. And I think there'll be at some point where we'll reach a tipping point in plastic packaging. That's one of the pillar that I actually look after for Sainsbury's directly. It's extremely functional in products, but we know we need to reduce our use of plastic. So we've got loads of work to do in that, and find new raw materials, and collaborate with others to drive on these issues, because this isn't a Sainsbury's only issue that we have to do. So we have to be collaborating globally. Our suppliers are global, are globally based as well. So how do we work together, share learnings, share ways to innovate, and invest together on new technologies?
So one of the things then would be to make sure that the wrapper or the coatings for food better keeps oxygen out of the food to avoid degradation, which is a massive issue in the food industry retailing wise, I guess.
Yes and no, it depends on the product. I think plastic's actually brilliant. So plastic's really efficient, and we've got some ways of doing that in areas with shorter shelf life in produce. I think there's a fine balance with the customers between food that they would expect to be fresh, and what fresh means to them, and how long you can keep the product in the shelf. And that's the debate we have constantly around freshness and quality, and how you maximize both quality and freshness and get a longer shelf life. And you can do that in a number of ways. There's lots of ways in produce, that just by adding, by using different packaging, so perforated packaging, where you let more air flow in, which protects the product and gives it a longer shelf life. And looking at products as well about frozen, and how do we do a better job with customers on frozen food, albeit actually the energy costs of in frozen food is higher. But how do we do frozen food and products that we sell in canned, how do we maximize those areas as well? And if we're thinking about what the work we do in packaging, we would never reduce the packaging in a product that would impact on the life of that product, the shelf life. We would be working in our supply base right through the supply chain, actually, around maximising life at every stage, and reducing food waste where we can. So we tend to, we've got a series of measures actually when we're looking at projects, and if one of them was to achieve a packaging reduction, but it reduced the waste of the product, we increased waste of the product, we wouldn't launch it.
I think the shelf life is quite an interesting area to consider, and I know that there are some businesses now looking at electronic shelf labels that bring produce that is approaching its end of use to bring it to the consumer's attention, and if they are there, there's a discount associated with that as a means of not throwing it away, but getting the consumer to, there's an education process there as well, but to actually get them to buy that product, which means more revenue for the retailers and less food waste. Are you seeing that in your sphere?
Yeah, I think we've done some trials with electronic food tables, but I think sort of technology-led solutions will help revolutionise this whole area actually, because quite a lot of those reductions at the moment are done quite manually. And my whole time in retail, there's a lot of discussions about manual reductions. I think we would try and decrease operational surplus when it's coming into the food supply chain anyway. Where we do have food waste, we look to redistribute it through our charity partners, which we have a number of. So we've worked with Neighbourly, Fair Share, and we make sure that depending on what's the best location for the store, then as much food as possible goes to a human mouth. There's a challenge around that, around what you can redistribute, because it's so close to the end of life. And then the other area is animal feed. So it'd be more important firstly to give it to a human, but what can we use for animal feed? And there's lots of within the supply base of leftover bits of bread from making sandwiches going into animal feed, because it's really good. Really good. It's got value there actually. But yeah, I think electronic shelf labels and how we digitalise this will be the future.
People talk about the IoT and digitalisation. I agree with that. And I'd like to introduce Martin Wickham, who's been patiently waiting to be brought into this conversation, and thank him for his patience. And he's still there, which is good. Martin, I want to just move the switch from the retailing end to the food manufacturing end, because that's also an area where I think education, technology, and other things can help greatly. What's your view on the food I've been in the food manufacturing side of 24,000 tons of hard cheese every year. So I know how difficult this is, but what's your view on the food manufacturing initiatives that can be brought to bear?
That's a really good question, and there's lots of very complex answers that we could give to that question. I mean, I'm just going to give you one fairly short answer in the context of food waste. I mean, when we look at food waste, as we heard from one of our speakers this morning, that there's around about 1.3 billion tons of food wasted worldwide. I mean, this is a huge quantity of waste, which has a total annual cost to the global economy of somewhere in about $1 trillion. So it's a huge waste. But when we tend to look at food waste and think about food waste, we tend to automatically switch to and start thinking about the food waste that we produce in our home. But actually there is another side to this, and that's the food waste that's produced by industry. And I think that this is where we can make big strides forward at the moment. I mean, we manufacture a lot of food, and during that manufacturing process, there is a number of waste streams that are produced. Now, historically, we have been fairly low innovation in terms of those waste streams. But if we want to implement a circular economy, there's a number of strategies that we can adopt. One is reduce those waste streams entirely, or eliminate them entirely. And another one is finding a more sustainable solution in managing those waste streams. Food manufacturing comprises of a number of complex processes, and so generates a vast amount of food waste, but there's actually a lot of complex materials in those food waste, which we can create value from. Like I said, historically, the way we've been dealing with these is fairly low economic and has an environmental value. For instance, we've been using them for animal feeds, anaerobic digestion, composting, incineration, land spreading, land filling. But like I said, food waste contains numerous chemicals that have a wide range of potential commercial applications. And within this area, there's a lot of very small startup businesses that are making real impact in this area. there's a real symbiosis in valorizing these waste streams for the food industry. And it's going in a number of different directions. I mean, some of the food waste streams we can actually push back into the food system, and they can actually be used for foods again for humans, not just going to animals. But there's more innovative products that are coming onto the market. I mean, just to give you two that I've come across recently, there's a compound called carbon quantum dots, which sounds very complex, but these are very small carbon nanoparticles, around about 10 nanometers in size, that can be used, that can be collected and manufactured from food waste streams, and are being done by a number of small companies around Europe and around the rest of the world. And these quantum dots, carbon quantum dot technology, can actually be used for food additive detection in terms of heavy metal ions, detection of pathogens. They're actually being used to detect and then remove harmful substances in the food industry. Now, we've just heard about plastics and how plastics are important, but again, waste streams are now being used to actually manufacture plastics. So there's compounds called PHAs, which are polyhydroxyl alkanates. They're essentially a polyester that's produced by nature, and we can use microbes, bacteria, and other organisms to actually produce bioplastics from these PHAs. And these are now being used to produce bioplastics. The benefit of these bioplastics are that they're fully degradable. And so not only are we reducing food waste, but we've also got a sustainable solution to that particular problem. So I think the short answer to your question is that we have these waste streams. They are, at the moment, environmentally bad, but they have a very potentially economic value that we can tap into. So I think that that's a good way that the industry can have an impact in this space.
Thank you, Martin. That's really good. And I actually know of a couple of initiatives in my work that is using laser technology to convert plastics to a carbon-based material called graphene and graphite, which in itself is pretty novel and unique. And there's an Israeli company doing that already at the moment, which I think industry needs to look at. Claire, can I come back to you on the food manufacturing? I know from experience that the retailers audit everyone in the food chain, from the farm to the paddock to the farm to everywhere. How do you look at the manufacturing process in industry from a food waste perspective? Is that part of the audit process that you adopt?
I'd say it should be more part of the day-to-day work of the food technologists and the sort of teams that are on those sites. The suppliers are actually on it themselves because there's quite low margins actually in some areas from a commercial perspective. So it's in their interest actually to really reduce food waste. And there's many sort of projects we'll be looking at the moment to say, is there, if you look at meat or if you look at chicken and what part of the chicken the customers like to eat, is there anything we can do with the other parts of those chicken that creates value? So they'll be doing that quite naturally through. And then we have a process at Sainsbury's called value chain analysis that we would take with our suppliers, and we would look at the end-to-end process completely, and we would have a couple of suppliers on that. We've worked on food waste specifically with the IGD as well, and we're encouraging our suppliers to add to sign up to Champions 12.3 from a UK perspective. And what we would do in a value chain analysis is look at right through every step from processing, from intake of raw materials, and we would look at waste and where they're producing too much product. And sometimes they're producing too much product because our orders maybe don't come in the right way for them. So there's quite a lot of stuff that we would just naturally look at efficiencies in that, and sort of, let's look at, can you order every 2 days? What's the shopping profile for customers in store? When's the best time to get that product in? So all that stuff would be mapped. And that would have been similar actually to my experience at M&S before I came to Sainsbury's. But yeah, massively complex, but can help create value and efficiency and make that supply chain more economically viable as well.
We'll be looking at the fish industry with Sean Dennis in a later panel session. So thank you very much for that plug. I'm sure he'd be delighted with that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Martin, you spent, I'm not going to embarrass you by how many years you've been in the food and beverage industry, but where do you see the trends? I mean, you've been in it a long time. How do you see the trends mapping out, given that the UN want to achieve zero hunger by 2030, for example, and 1 ton of food waste prevented can save about 2.5 tons of CO2. So it's a serious issue. Where do you see the trends going from your view, given all the hours and days and weeks and years that you've been in this industry?
Before I answer that question, I think it's probably best if I take a look back. I mean, I have been working in the industry for many years. I'm much younger than I actually look. Sorry, I look much younger than I actually am. You know, if you look back at publications from 25 years ago, and you look at when they were talking about food sustainability, you see a very different conversation to what you're seeing nowadays. In terms of food sustainability, around about the 80s, when I was very much starting out my career, it was all around security of the food supply chain and the health, safety, affordability, and quality, making sure that we get products that are safe to the consumer. Now, food sustainability has a completely different meaning, and so the biggest change that I've seen in that time is a change in mindset from the individuals, right from the consumers, right across industry and even into policy, etc. And that meaning of food sustainability now is very much around the environment and the impact that food manufacturing, supply, and consumption has on environmental sustainability. And we hear a lot of things about greenhouse gases, nitrogen water cycles, impact on biodiversity, etc. So probably the short answer is that the change that I've seen and the change that I continue to like to see is this change in thinking in the way we are. Now, what's driving this? That's a really good question. But actually, what we've seen this snowball, and really we've seen this explosion, especially within the UK, in the last 2 to 3 years of public interest in food sustainability. Not just food waste, but also plastics that we've heard about from Claire. And really that's been driven by, it's been put under the spotlight by a number of celebrities, input from NGOs, and also contributions from public bodies such as DEFRA. So I think what we're seeing is that food sustainability is rightly so becoming an issue, or at least a topic of conversation and action right across the spectrum of stakeholders. It's not just coming from the consumers, it's not just coming from the industry, it's not just coming from the policymakers, but it's coming from all aspects. And so moving forward, I think that what we'll see is a very different environment in terms of our food system, our food consumption, the way we manufacture our food, the way we transport our food, the way we consume our food, and the way we deal with our waste. I think that very rapidly, and we're talking about, you know, only 5 to 10 years, probably not even 10 years, maybe just 5 years, we'll see this change. So I think that if we look back at the food systems and the food environment where we were 25 years ago, it's probably unrecognizable to where we are now. But if we look forward to 5 years' time, with all the innovation that's coming across and all this input from all the different stakeholders, I think that the food industry or the food system in 5 years' time will look very different to how it is today.
Thank you, Martin. We've got 5 minutes to go, and I wanted just to bring in one other topic for me, and it involves something I've worked with and I've been involved with for 10 years, and that's graphene in terms of its barrier properties. We talked about food in terms of avoiding difficulties with, and you mentioned putting air into products, and I get that totally, but where you want something that's in an inert environment, a barrier film that creates that, and I know there's chat in the line about Barex. Graphene itself has a fantastic ability to do that, and that's an advanced material. And maybe, Martin, that's where advanced materials comes into play in all of this process. You've got the IoT, the Industrial 4.0, and so on and so forth. Final comment from Claire. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Claire? It's been fascinating so far. I've made so many notes, I don't quite know where to go, actually.
I think the final point I would make is just around collaboration, actually, and the importance of that. Because I know, and you've just mentioned graphene, and you mentioned it to me when we talked, I know there's a lot of technology that's sitting, waiting to be exploited, but sometimes retailers don't know about it, or it might come, it might be closed off before it gets to us. And so it's how we create that sort of open dialogue with ourselves, with others, with our suppliers together, so that we can work on projects, because some of these things cost a lot, but if we do them at scale, we can reduce the cost. So yeah, keep talking, sharing, and bringing ideas forward.
We will do, trust me. Martin, anything else from you before we finish our session?
For me, it's probably coming back to food waste. I mean, what we've seen over the last 15 years, well, 15 years ago within the UK, we saw a peak in food waste. It was well over 35% of all food was wasted within the UK. Now, over the last 15 years, we've seen that reduce in numbers, and there's been, you know, a 15% reduction, at least a 15% reduction just in the last 10 years. Interestingly enough, with COVID, we saw a further reduction almost immediately, straight away when we went into lockdown in the UK, where, you know, 79% of the population, you know, majority of the population were really looking at pre-planning their foods, checking what they had in their fridges and cupboards, managing their food at home better, checking use-by dates, and and then using the leftovers much better. Something that we've been very poor at doing in the UK. It's something that's very easy. Now, if we can take our learnings from that COVID period and move forward, then I think we can make a real impact on food waste just within our homes.
Thank you, Martin. We're going to pick up on the food waste thing. Again, fantastic introduction. Thank you so much to the next panel group, because there's some good things coming out of that. I'm very pleased. Thank you so much for both of you for joining, and I appreciate the time and effort you put in. Thank you very much.
But Ray, can I just one quick question for Claire?
Yes.
Sorry, for Claire. There's a couple of questions about.
Oh, okay. I've missed those.
No, it's fine. Claire touched on one about collaboration. Two questions here. One, does Sainsbury's have any initiatives in particular in place to kind of access new technology, and how do people go about doing that? So if there's a new innovation or a new idea, what's kind of the process? And the second question, you co-published a report, I think around 150th anniversary of Sainsbury's, and there was a mention in there about the future of food and the supermarket. And there was a bit in there that says at some point we will go to Sainsbury's or other supermarkets to collect equipment to grow our own meat. Do you think that will ever happen? And if so, when? So we're prepared for it.
I will start actually first with the question about contacting people in Sainsbury's. It's really hard actually, which is why I come to get in contact with the right person in retail. I get that actually, which is why quite often I will go and speak at different events, because I'm happy people come to me directly, never a problem. I can connect you internally. We've got numerous working groups around to deliver that net zero plan. So there's there's ways for us to access funding together. So we've got some proposals in at the moment where we've got some funding to do some work in fish. I've got numerous collaborations in plastic for R&D funding, so we're totally up for that. But you can come directly to me if you're sitting with any technology that you want to talk about. So I expect to be inundated today. And then in the future of foods report, it's a good question. Now, that report was tended to be quite controversial and push the boundaries. I think there's something in the whole the whole thing around food, and I have certainly spent quite a lot of time over the last few weeks talking to people about cultured meat. And there's lots you could do with that. So we know more people have been interested in growing their own veg at home at the moment, and hydroponics you can grow. We're looking at them not only for food, but there's systems you can set up at home, quite expensive for herbs and things. So I don't think I think it could come. I sort of sit in the fence about it, but if I look at the science and talk to people around me, I think I could see a world where you do get there, and your products are much more personalized, which would impact on food waste at the same time as deal with other sort of concerns consumers have around products.
Excellent. So we'll be going to Sainsbury's to buy our equipment soon then.
So
Thanks, Claire.
Claire, I could go on about, actually, I was in a seminar not long ago where someone from California was saying that they've invented a process that they still need to sort out that it actually makes meat from air.
Oh wow, I've not heard that one.
Believe it.
No, I've not heard.
Did I see that that Alistair Burt had his hand up for a question? No.
No.
Oh, no. Right. Okay.
We'll move on to the next panel.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
That's good. That's good. I'd like to thank you again, Claire. Thank you again, Martin. Excellent things. Lots of thought-provoking, and I know there's some chats in the chat room as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're moving on then to panel 2, which is actually all about using technology. We've talked about technology, and hopefully our guests are here. So we've got first up Ignacio. Ignacio is the managing director of Winnow Solutions. Ignacio, where are you? Don't see you.
I'm here.
You are. You're in Spain, aren't you, sir? I think at the moment on vacation. But thank you very much for your time away. Ignacio is global head of operations of Winnow. Winnow is all about. He's been involved in food and beverage for quick service restaurants, Michelin star restaurants. He's a sustainability enthusiast. We need many more of you, sir, if I may say. And he does the right thing for business and for profit and for environment. And he's Winnow's mission to inspire chefs to use and see that food is too valuable to waste. And we can talk about some of the initiatives that Winnow's got. And welcome to the panel. We'll come back to you in a second.
Thank you.
I've got Khalid Al-Amal. Khalid, you're here. Welcome. He's CEO of Bia. Now in his 12th year at the company, he's led the transformation of Bia from a waste management business to a sustainability pioneer, operating in a massive range of industries, which if I was to read them all, would be a little bit longer here. But he's really been championing the Middle East's move towards green solutions, and he's been the driving force for the visions of the future, facilitating achievement of several milestones, including the company's expansion into Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Sean Dennis, we've mentioned fish. Sean is co-founder and CEO of Seafood Souk. Apart from that, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's been all around the world, done lots of things in Hong Kong, Switzerland, Dubai, USA, and in Seafood Souk, it's a technology company building a digital ecosystem. Sean, you can explain a bit more about that when we come back to you in a minute. And he's been heavily involved in that and doing really well. And Dr. Beenish Siddiqui, all right, Beenish, hello. Beenish is CEO of AH Hydrogel. She's a University of Manchester PhD and a material scientist. And earlier on, we've heard about the sustainability of supply chain. And as a consequence of some of the things we've been doing with that, Beenish landed a £1 million Innovate UK grant to develop vertical farming systems using a unique food-based polymer hydrogel, and also taking advanced materials to remote monitoring and cost reduction of production. So those are our four panelists. I'd like to start with Khalid. Khalid, 38% of food is wasted in the UAE. We've heard about that. It's a massive issue, and you've got a waste management center. Could you sort of elaborate on some of the initiatives you've been making on organic food waste and the recycling of plastics, please?
Sure. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, pleasure to be here and talk about food waste in this webinar. So maybe just to talk about what BIA does. BIA has been around just for over 12 years, and it was set up to tackle the problem of waste. The UAE and the region is known to be one of the largest generators of waste per capita. So this was an immediate problem that BIA addressed from the start. Now today, BIA has become a group company. We cover different sectors, but we started with looking at how do we solve the problem of waste. And as you mentioned, in the UAE, up to, or 38% of food is wasted. And when it comes to the month of Ramadan, it goes up to even 60%. So this was an immediate problem. So we build the infrastructure. Today, we are the only fully integrated waste management company. So we don't just treat the waste, we also collect the waste, we manage landfills, and now we are building or completing the construction this year of the first waste to energy plant in the region. So we operate all over the UAE. We also operate in Saudi and in Egypt recently. So we collect all types of waste and we treat all types of waste. So at our waste management complex, which is located in the Emirate of Sharjah, it's a 4-kilometer plot where all our facilities are located. So one of the facilities is a material recovery facility, which is the largest in the Middle East. So all the municipal solid waste enters this facility and it's segregated through a mechanical process. We also have a tire recycling facility, industrial wastewater treatment facility. We have a construction and demolition waste recycling facility, and so on. We have a total of 9 different facilities today, and by next year, there will be 13, where today we've achieved a diversion rate away from landfill of 76%, which is the highest in the Middle East. And once our waste to energy plant is commissioned later this year, we will be close to hitting zero waste to landfill. So we've been working on this for the last 12 years. The United Nations, one of their sustainability goals is to have food waste by 2030. So the UAE is also committed to that target. And food that is waste, food that is disposed in landfills also becomes a major hazard, because that's one of the main sources of methane. So this is what we do with the food waste is we have a compost plant. So within our waste management complex, one of the facility is a compost plant where we process organic and vegetation waste, and the compost then is used and converted to fertilizer. So this is just in general, but today as a group, we are also looking at, when I reach zero waste towards the end of the year, landfill, how can I repurpose the landfill? So that project is going to be a solar landfill project, which will be, that landfill will be repurposed, will generate 120 megawatts of power. We're also what we feel is very strong and is very also relevant to this panel is BIA in the last 6 years started focusing more on technology and digitalization. So we've made it 2 of our core pillars today is sustainability and digitalization, because for modern economies, these we feel have to go hand in hand. So we've invested a lot in this area, from tracking our vehicles, the route optimization, using AI to do that. In addition to, we have a contract with the Ministry of Health for track and trace of all medicine in the UAE. And we've done a lot of initiatives, including we've created a marketplace for trading commodities, recyclable commodities. So this is, we started that this year. We've also Uberized waste collection. We have a platform now where you can collect waste using an app. And our headquarters that we will be delivered later this year, designed by the late Zaha Hadid, will be one of the most sustainable as well as one of the smartest buildings in the region. So that's fully powered by renewables, platinum certified, as well as it's the first building in the region which will fully be AI integrated. So that just reflects our DNA of being sustainable and digital. So this is just in general what we've been looking at, and we're looking at to replicating all that we do here in the UAE. In Saudi, we operate in Medina, one of the holy sites. So we manage the waste for the whole city. We have 3,000 people in Medina. And in Egypt, we just started recently with a new project, the new administrative capital. So that's where the new capital of Egypt will be. It's a city that will have up to 6 million people. So we just started there, and with a target of reaching 80% diversion.
Khalid, that's fantastic. You mentioned, and everyone's been mentioning AI and digitalization, and I'd like to bring in one of the key elements of this, which is Winnow Systems and Ignacio. Ignacio, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Can you just talk about how the AI technology works in Winnow? And if you can't, then don't, but I'd like to know a little bit more about how you've done that, how you develop it, and what barriers you've had to get this into the marketplace, because you've now reached 40 countries in the world with this technology. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Just expand upon that for us a bit, because that's one of the key aspects of getting things in the market, education and getting people to adopt. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you everyone, and it's a huge pleasure to be here. As you said, I'm a sustainability enthusiast. It comes from a very early age because I grew up in a very little town where food waste was not an issue. So I didn't realize the food waste issue was an issue at all until a later age, because in my town, like, farmers will knock on your door with what they collected on the day, and fishermen will do the same. It will be some sort of old school Amazon Prime with groceries. So we were just consuming what was for the day. But now I'm in Dubai. I am looking after operations for WeKnow. WeKnow is a British company headquartered in London. But we have offices in Dubai, Singapore, Shanghai, Chicago, and Cluj, and we're now live in 40 countries, as you mentioned. What we do is we basically build artificial intelligence tools to reduce food waste in commercial kitchens. We use a version of AI that is called computer vision. And we have a camera that sits on top of our clients' bins and recognizes everything that is being thrown away and takes pictures of it and identifies each and every item or full recipe. So it can recognize tomatoes, but it can also recognize tomato soup, tomato gravy, or a curry, for example, even though it's all mixed and done. And we have a scale underneath that detects the weight, and then those two data entries are matched with cost. And we basically send a report to our clients that said, you've wasted this much, this much, and this much. You need to improve your production on this and this and this. But not only that, we also go a step ahead, step beyond that, and we actually look at efficiencies. So we look at things like, are you actually trimming the salmon the way that you should be trimming it? Is there some inefficiencies on the training of your team because we see a lot of vegetable cuts? Or maybe you change your supplier and you went with a cheaper fruit producer that is actually delivering you less yield and they're less value for money. So you're actually spending more money on it. So we can actually, we can actually really shine a light on the food waste issue. And it is great so far. It has been a difficult journey because food waste, it's interesting. We all know the big figures, right? We know that we waste 30% of what we produce. In fact, food waste is a worse environmental issue than plastics, the single-use plastics. Food waste from a carbon emissions perspective is 3 times worse. And we don't talk about it that much. It's still sort of a taboo topic, right? And in the hospitality sector, companies waste over 20% of what they purchase, and yet they don't recognize it as an issue. They think sometimes that that's already embedded in the P&L, they're already preventing a food cost there, that's all mixed. What we're trying to do is actually prove that food waste is a solvable issue and that have financial returns. So actually, I think it was the FAO that said, or RAP, actually RAP in UK that said that for every euro, for every pound that you invest in sustainability and in reduction of food waste, you actually get 14 pounds back. So the return of investment, it's huge. And we're working with over 1,500 kitchens worldwide, 40 countries, as you mentioned. We're saving $42 million to our clients in food waste every year. And what's more important for me is that we saving over 36 million meals per year from being wasted, right? We save, I think it's a meal every second and a half right now, or every 2 seconds. And about 10% of those meals and those savings are actually happening in the UAE. So we have a partnership with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, and we have what we call the Food Waste Pledge. That is basically an invitation to the hospitality sector to reduce food waste, to reduce meals. And we're measuring the target was to save over 3 million meals per year by 2020. Obviously, the pandemic kind of got a little bit in the middle, and we were overly achieving that target, but it was not a real picture, right? Because all these reductions that we're seeing now in food waste is just because there's less demand, less travel, less tourism, and less things happening. But we're on track. We hit the targets for 2018, 2020. Obviously, we hit it, but it was not just because of our technology, but we are hitting it in 2021. So we're a very mission-driven company, and we really want to solve this issue for everyone. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Sorry, I derailed a little bit. Apologies for that.
I think, Ignacio, it opens more questions that it solves, but thank you for that anyway.
Great.
I appreciate it. One of the questions I want to come back to, and I will in a minute, is education, because I know Khalid has got a Department of Education, and I know that you're involved in education in terms of educating that. And we want to see if we can get this educated into the home kitchens, maybe. That was where an awful lot of waste is going. Before we do that, Sean, you patiently waited. I know Beanish is patiently waiting as well. Let's listen to you about how you've taken technology to do something in which we all take probably for granted, the supply chain of the fish industry, which is what Claire alluded to. I know there are plenty of issues, and and as you say, you've got a suit on today because you're a startup, and this is novel for you. But let's please come on, explain a bit about what you do, because I'm fascinated to hear it. Go on.
My Sunday best. And before I start, actually, Claire, I would love to connect with you to chat more on some of this, to see if we can work together with you. Would be an honor.
I will connect you, no problem.
Cool, thank you. So Seafood Souk, it's been interesting listening to some of the conversations so far. I think we sit slightly further up the supply chain than most of the, I guess, solutions or focus has been. And seafood, we've all, or most of us have probably seen that documentary that came out not that long ago, Seaspiracy. So everyone now has become an armchair expert in the seafood industry, which is great because it's put it to the forefront as to the issues that happen. What they didn't focus on, or where they did focus, I guess, was in the illegal, unreported, unregulated IUU fishing and bad fishing practices with nets and the damage it does to the overfishing. Statistics attached to that are not only are we overfishing our oceans, but within the supply chain, once it leaves the fishing grounds or the boats, and before it reaches buyers like Sainsbury's, within that supply chain, in developing countries, the average wastage or loss is about 40–45%, and in developed countries can be around 25%. So that's before we've even got to the stage that we focused on thus far in this webinar. That's disgusting. With all the technology and the processes that we have, and we're still losing nearly half of the fish. And fish being such an important product, one from an income perspective for developing nations, but also from a health perspective and the sensitivity of the product. It's probably the most highly valuable, highly perishable item that's traded globally that we consume, and therefore really important to make sure that that product arrives in the condition that it left the fisheries. We're doing a project with Oman at the moment where we identified that tuna, for example, and a lot of the fish exits the water, or at first it's caught and it's grade A. By the time it reaches the border, even just with the UAE, which is a 4-hour drive in some cases, it can only be classified as grade C and good for canning. That's because there are multiple, in the case of Oman, average about 5 or 6 unnecessary steps in the value chain or the supply chain, where it's being sold to distributor to trader to distributor to trader. Seafood Souk, through use of a marketplace, and in effect our front or customer facing window is the marketplace, but what actually happens behind closed doors is an efficient or digitized supply chain that provides traceability of that supply chain. We eliminate the need for all those unnecessary steps in the supply chain, thus reducing cost of the product to the end consumer, increasing freshness and shelf life, which if we're talking about fresh, average to 7 to 14 day shelf life. If I can give you an extra 20 to 25% shelf life as a restaurant who may or may not lose a booking tonight, for example, that's a massive amount of food products they won't have to throw away because they can use it still tomorrow, for example. In addition to that, the cost associated with providing traceability, and I think there's a lot of traceability plays out on the market, but they're always a value added solution to the actual product. Through using Seafood Souk as the marketplace front window and the transaction and or full supply chain oversight occurring within, let's call it our ecosphere, traceability can be provided to the consumer or the buyer at little to at no extra cost because it's inherent in the business model. So when we're having conversations on sustainability, traceability should know where our product comes from, avoiding baiting and switching, which is what occurs in many cases now as well when you do buy from legacy distribution models. that shouldn't be a cost that needs to be passed down to the consumer. Buyers or business buyers shouldn't have to pay extra money to know that they are actually getting the product that they're paying for. And that's where, again, we provide that solution. And I think my favorite phrase to summarize it is, traceability is the precursor to sustainability. With traceability, we bring, wow, this is a really cheesy way of saying it, but bring light to an otherwise very opaque industry that is seafood, that Seaspiracy highlighted heavily, and which cannot function with platforms like ourselves or with supply chains that have been digitized and provide traceability. IUU fishing cannot occur or cannot trade when trade is done through a traceable or digitized platform.
So you are out to revolutionize the industry then, sir, as I understand it? Yes? Thank you very much. Talking of revolutionizing industry, Beanish. Beanish has been involved in creating a revolutionary food-grade polymer for hydroponically growing plant-based products. And I know that there was I think he's left actually. There's a company called Grow Up which is using vertical farming of leafy greens. Beanish, can you just explain to the audience so many questions I've got for you, but I'll keep them as simple as I can. One of which is, why did you choose this process to do vertical farming, and what impact do you think is going to happen for what you're going to achieve across the piece in sustainability? And we can talk about coir and the other things called peat as well. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting me, and good afternoon and morning to all of you. So the reason I went through the process, I will be very honest with all of you. So my background wasn't in indoor farming, things like that. I did my PhD undergrad degrees in chemistry, material science, and it was more research based. But then when after finishing my PhD, then I realized like there is like, when we do research in academia, I mean, not all of them, but it's quite difficult to take technology from lab to commercial setting and things like that. And then I decided, at that point, I decided like how to do research that will benefit our future generation. So not only benefit for us, so it's for sustainability. That was the key. I think most of us do care about sustainability. So for me, it was the same thing. So in indoor farming, I catched my interest because that was the thing. I mean, obviously, because of now most of the population from villages, they are moving to cities. So for example, myself, I'm originally from Kashmir, and it's more agri. It was the city I am from. Firstly, it was really agri-based city, and even my grandparents, they used to grow like weeds, crops, but step by step now, for example, my dad, when he came, so they are moving away from traditional agriculture, and they are moving more like in industry and things like that. Here in UK and even in Europe, when I heard about indoor farming, to be honest with you, unfortunately, not like 10 years ago, I heard and I saw about this technology like back in like literally 5 years ago. And then I started reading about it, and I found a gap. Like indoor farming is a great solution. It reduces food mileage and lots of other things. But the key issue with indoor farming are still, because if you want to make it sustainable, there are obviously there are a number of issues, but I will just focus on sustainable one. So one of the issue is when you grow plants, for example, you need, so instead of, probably lots of you are not aware of indoor farming. When you grow crops in indoor farming, you don't use soil. Instead of soil, you use certain substrate to support plant structure. And the issue with the current substrate, for example, peat or rock wool, they are not sustainable. Peat is most likely to ban in UK probably in 2024. Definitely by 2030 30, but if we will bring our product, it will be, but then this is the major issue with indoor farming. And the second thing is like there are some alternative product, but supply chain is not really good. So at that point, because my research was more in medical field, then what I realized, what if we take that substrate, if we replace the traditional substrate with more environment friendly substrate. So I have developed hydrogel, and now the idea is like, because this hydrogel substrate is more based on environment friendly components, food based, as Ray already mentioned. So it will increase the crop yield, but the most important thing is it's recyclable. For example, the rock wool, we are using in rock wool as it's rock. So what is happening, if you go in indoor farming, lots of indoor farmers, they do use rock wool. And what is happening, once they are done growing of plants, there are lots of piles of rock wool. And obviously it's rock, it will stay over there for millions of years. So it will increase the greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. But with our substrate, what will happen after using in indoor farming, then you can literally put in soil, and in soil it will increase the fertility of soil. It will reduce, it will not only increase the fertility of soil, but it will also reduce the water usage by traditional farmers. So this is a sustainable solution. So in short terms, the reason I came into this field was like the sustainability, and to make sure that like the way we are growing in crops in indoor farming, it's more like sustainable. So Ray, if I missed something, you can highlight it, and then I'll just come.
I think there's other things, isn't there? There's use of cocoa and that, which is also becoming a big issue. For me as well, though, I do believe, and it's on the retailers and everyone's uses the name of sustainability, but there's an education as to what that means. And I think everyone talks about it, but nobody really, the general public don't really understand what it actually means. So it comes down to education. Can I bring in Khalid again on education? Because I know you've been in BIA doing quite a lot of work, and along with you, Ignacio, as well, on educating the users and the general public. Could you just say a few things about that for me, Khalid, please?
Sure. Awareness is very important. So, to tackle the problem of food waste and in general waste, to reduce waste, to recycle waste. So we started the BIA environment in 2000, and since then we have reached over 250,000 students in the UAE, and in addition to that, so this is a program that is not just a physical program, it's also online. We have annual awards, and we get a lot of participation. So part of the problem we have here in the UAE is people don't segregate the waste. So a lot of awareness still needs to be done. And another challenge we have also in the UAE is the population mix of people from all over the world, different nationalities. Plus, many of them are, on transit. Some of them would come a few years and leave, and so on. So this is a challenge, and so awareness and education is continuous. So we have this program at the school that's been running successfully, I can say, and we have started seeing some improvement. In addition to that, we also, whenever we start, we have started the two-stream bins in all the residential areas in Sharjah, at least here about also 10 years ago. And we have our team that passes by every single home with an awareness kit in 4 languages to explain to people why should they segregate, what value that will have, and so on. So this is a continuous effort that we have to continue that. And with COVID now, we've switched a lot of this to online. But I do think, what COVID did also for us, people became more aware of the challenges when it comes to sustainability and climate change, and they've taken this more seriously. How keeping communities clean, keeping their cities clean. So it's being more hygiene, taking more. So that definitely we feel that there's been some benefit in there. Also for the general public, we have loyalty programs to promote recycling and promote segregation. So that's something that we do of. And we're doing now the same. We're looking at doing the same in Saudi and Egypt also.
Thank you very much for that. Ignacio, a quick word on education.
Yeah, please. I love this topic. It was one of the biggest challenges that we have as a company and that we still face. People are not educated on food waste. People don't know the size of the issue, and people are some sort of de-attached to it. It's like a blame game. It's like you ask retailers, they say actually the people are purchasing want this kind of packaging. You go to a restaurant, they say this is the people say it's the chef, and then there's always like a vicious cycle going around. As a company who face this, one of our main goals is actually raising awareness. And one of the things that we do as a company that obviously it doesn't really generate direct revenue for us is educational projects. So we do things like we go to companies like noon.com, for example, and we talk to them, we give them webinars about food waste. What can they do at home? Not through the use of our technology, but actually giving them a better perspective of the issue of food waste. And it's things, for example, when you talk to families and you talk about water consumption, people don't know how much water is put into food and how much water you're actually wasting. When you waste a tomato, there's 30 to 50 liters of water that are going down the drain there, because that's what was needed to create that tomato, right? And we give a lot of examples, and we do a lot of this work with organizations, with public, with people, with everywhere that wants to, everyone that wants to hear about it, because it is truly one of the biggest challenges of our time right now, and it's way bigger than it looks like. And I love that scene also look at how they are a little bit above in the food waste hierarchy, right? And how we should be actually preventing. Like transformation is great, and we need to keep, like getting that food and transforming it into something else. But ideally, we should prevent that food loss and that food waste from happening in the beginning, and we should reduce production, and we should be a bit more conscious of the way we produce and the way we consume. And there's another thing that is related to food waste and food loss that people don't talk about, that is actually going back to seasonality. We want to eat tuna. One of the problems why we overfishing is because we want to eat fish every day, every year. In my house, you don't eat tuna certain months. It's just not consumed. You don't, because it's not tuna season. And if it's not tuna season, you don't eat tuna. And it should be that way. We're losing that. And that's contributing to food waste and food loss heavily as well.
Ignacio, that's brilliant. And I'm going to introduce both Beanish and Sean back in, because we're going to talk about tuna for one more minute. I'm literally running out of time, and I'm getting beaten up by Omar. Thank you very much, Omar. But this is a fascinating topic, very, very important. Beanish, education for the grower in terms of vertical farming. We went, didn't we, to see a very high class R&D center on vertical farming, and they were saying that some of the growers just don't want to change because change is difficult for them to do that. Education wise, how do you see that?
So for me, I mean, to be honest with you, education wise, it's more like the why they don't want to change. So probably I will be slightly off the topic. Why they don't want to change, that is the thing. No matter how much you educate them about sustainability, business, unfortunately, they don't care. Probably big firms, like, they do care about sustainability, but small growers, they care more about profit rather than sustainability. So what they think is that, the other thing is, they don't, with the new technologies, the other issue or barrier, I will say, is like it's, if they don't want to change their system. So for example, if they invested in their infrastructure, and if there is new technology that is coming into field that is more sustainable, but if it costs them, then they won't adopt it. So for me, education, the way we can educate grower or like change it, we need to change as a scientist, we need to change as a companies to make sure that the product we are bringing into market fits with the grower needs, so that, and then it profit them. So that is the way. Otherwise, to be honest with you, there are lots of talks, and when you talk with people, businesses, they will be like, yes, we care about sustainability, we care about future generation, but in actual they care more about profit and things like that. So the way we can change, yes, we can keep sustainability, but at the same time, when we educate them, we need to discuss about how it will benefit their business. So we need to combine these things together, like as a startup or as any technology that we are bringing into market. So probably it doesn't like get why you asking, but for me it needs to be like
question, because it's all about if you're asking me as a manufacturer to change my capital equipment process or something in there that's going to cost me money, I'm not going to do it unless there's a massive reason to do that. And that's part of the issue with the growing circle. And I do get the sustainability. Maybe there's a role for the retailers to drive that a little bit harder.
Yes, yeah.
And
So
I know they're talking about it, yes?
just quickly to add on it, so for example, we are engaging with certain growers. So firstly, they were not interested in sustainable product, so that is the part of like retailers. So one of lots of retailers in UK now, they said they will buy products from the grower who are taking care of, like, who are growing in a sustainable way or things like, yes, from top, if there is a pressure like from retailers, then growers will adopt, but at the same time cost is major factor for them besides sustainability, like for any new technology.
I agree. Sean, one last word from you. You've been brilliant at being patient again. Thank you so much. One thing that occurs to me is that ice and packaging of fish must take an awful lot of ice to keep fish fresh. So your technology is reducing the use of ice in terms of keeping things fresh and things like that. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, and whilst we're not specifically focused on the hardware, it's more the creation of a more efficient supply chain means there's less of a requirement for continued topping up of the ice. We were actually selected by the let me get this right, United Nations Sustainable Decade for Ocean, Sustainable Ocean Decade, as a case study to showcase the supply chain digitization that we're working on, and the traceability that it brings, and the efficiency that it brings as well, which has been pretty interesting. One thing that we do, or we are working on, which is pretty interesting, which will limit in some cases, and especially going back to what Ignacio said with the tuna, is working in partnership with IPNLF, which is the International Pole and Line Fishing Association. So that is a type of fishing which eliminates all forms of bycatch. Again, people who have seen Seaspiracy know that that is one of the major reasons for big overfishing. Eliminates that, and this is a way for fish that are caught, especially the majority of our fish comes from developing nations where supply chains may or may not be as they should be, and transport can be difficult. So then that's the reason why ice has historically been required. For higher value products like tuna, we've been working with IPNLF to develop almost like a casing, which will wrap around the tuna and give it, I guess, climate equivalent to the being iced for up to 8 to 9 hours, which again will stop the requirement for ice throughout that supply chain, and as well as enable it to arrive at its destination fresher, which has been pretty interesting. So again, whilst we're not directly focused on ice provision, it is a major issue within the seafood industry and something we're working on helping out with. I think we've been really pleasantly surprised, and I guess just to add on what everyone else was saying with the education side, pleasantly surprised by the reaction from the, let's call them the good actors, in terms of the suppliers, wanting to be part of the traceability discussion and wanting to put their information and the good that they do and their processes to communicate that with the business buyers. Because historically in the legacy distribution model, a lot of that information was lost because it would just be sold as salmon, or Norwegian salmon, for example, or tuna from Tanzania. Now they're able to say, these are our boats, these are the fishing practices we have, or these are the farms, these are the processes we do, and these are the extra things that we do at night to like tuck them in and make sure they're good, etc., etc. And they're proud of doing that. And because that doesn't cost anything extra through our model, it doesn't matter whether the buyers value it or not. They've got pressure from us, the consumers, to start valuing it. And when you get the good buyers who do want to, then it's a win-win-win for all involved, which has been great to see.
Thank you very much. Omar, I apologize, we're 5 minutes over.
No, that was amazing. I think we could do another whole session on this. Thank you so much for everybody. So much to take away from that. Just before I hand over to our closing speaker, I just want to say, look, for anybody on this webinar, if you're interested in the UAE in terms of growth or opportunities or anything else, please reach out to the UAE-UK Business Council. That's what we're here for. We will send out an email with all the contact details you need. We'll be doing a lot more of these discussions in the future. And actually, one of our biggest objectives is to support UAE and UK companies grow into respective markets and access and make life a lot easier. But thank you, Ray. Thank you to all our speakers. I now have the pleasure to hand over to our closing speaker. And he's somebody that I've been a big fan of for a long time. So it's great to have him here. The Right Honourable Alistair Burt. I don't think there's many people that know more about the Middle East than Alistair, and great to see him. He is now the chairman of the Emirates Society. I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him tell you more about the Emirates Society and their work. Alistair, over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Omar. I suspect there's a few million people who know a bit more about the Middle East than me, but it's kind of you to say what you do. I wanted, first of all, on behalf of everyone who's been part of it today, just to express our thanks to all those who've made this really quite memorable morning. Thanks to all the key speakers, too many to pick out individually, but I think particularly to Ray, who's done a great job to hold it all together. And to keep the discussion moving. Not that it needed any great assistance. We were talking about things that are fundamental to all of us. I don't have the same background as Binish and Ignacio in coming from an environment and a sense where closeness to nature and agriculture was key. I grew up in an urban environment in the 1950s and 1960s. But what I can remember is that our waste bin at home was pretty small compared to the 2 or 3 sizable waste containers we now have at many homes in the United Kingdom. And I sometimes worry if recycling, which a lot of people have got, is used as an easy substitute for cutting down on waste. Because if you feel you're doing your bit by putting the refuse in the right container, you're not really getting the point about reducing the amount that you're putting in. And I thought the discussion today from all sorts of different quarters, it gave me a sense of the need to have a combination of innovation, of technology, of commercial responsibility, public awareness, but also government oversight, because all this won't happen purely by magic and by market forces, and there's got to be some elements there. But ultimately, it's got to be a question of it being worthwhile. And if people are forgetting that the most important thing that's worthwhile is having a sustainable environment, well, they just have to watch the news all around them at the moment to realize the risks that we're running and to emphasize the importance of food sustainability and the contribution waste can make of that. Well, the time couldn't be better to get that message over. I thought there was an awful lot in today's seminar, and I know that having been recorded, we'll be able to get it to more people, and I'm sure more people will be interested. Improving that sense of public awareness is going to be absolutely key. The Emirates Society has therefore been really appreciative of being able to partner in relation to this. The Emirates Society is the friendship group between the UAE and the UK, inaugurated by respective foreign ministers a couple of years ago. We're very proud to have the support of Ambassador Mansour Abahul in London, who supports the work that goes on here very strongly, and I hope has been on the call today. And essentially, we look at that friendship relationship right across the spectrum: arts, culture, diplomacy, science and technology, defense and security issues, political issues, but also we very much support the commercial relationship, bearing in mind a lot of members of the Emirates Society are people who currently live and work in either place, and certainly contain those who have in the past lived and worked in both places. And really the Emirates Society cements the affection that we each feel for the other state and the friendships we've made over many years. We have a website, we have a Twitter feed, so do go there if you want further information. We're a very strong supporter of the UAE-UK Business Council. I am particularly because with His Excellency Dr. Amar Gargash, we set this up in 2011, all those years ago. Delighted to see it being so strong and being carried on now in so many different ways. And the innovations that we've heard about today emphasize how much that we can still do in the future. It's a great year looking forward. Dubai Expo is coming up. We have the celebration of 50 years through National Day and beyond. There's a lot going on between the two states. And I think today just emphasized the importance of that relationship in very, very practical and important issues. And I've been delighted that we've been a part of it. So big thanks to Omar for holding it all together technically, to Ray again for managing everyone, and to all the speakers who've been so educative. It's been a great morning, and I hope more people see it from the recordings to come in the future. Thanks, Omar.
Thanks, Alistair. Thank you for that. Well, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Look out, there'll be an email with all the details and the link if you want to watch us again or share it with anybody. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Bradley, Nejla, all the speakers. And have a great day. Thank you.